Welcome, fencers and non-fencers alike, to a brief overview of the three weapons used in modern Olympic fencing and a discussion of their unique styles and appeal. The goal of this video is to help guide you on either understanding and enjoying watching fencing or to determine which weapon you would most enjoy trying. The three weapons used in modern Olympic fencing are foil, saber, and epee, and each have their own unique history. Each evolved from a different style of combat and have distinctive rules and styles that descend from that style of combat. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to go through each weapon individually. I'm going to discuss their dominant rules, and then I'm going to discuss what that means for you as someone who's potentially getting into fencing. The first, and maybe the most stereotypically fencing weapon of all of these, is foil. Foil descends from gentlemanly dueling. What this means is it's very technical, very fluid, it's very beautiful to watch. This has a limited target area and a very rhythmic nature that makes for very close, very fast-paced bouts. A foil is also going to be the lightest weight sword out of any of the three, which contributes to that very quick, very fluid style. The dominant traits of foil. Foil is a stabbing-only weapon. What that means is there is a button on the end of the sword that I can show you here. This is actually an epee, but it's also a stabbing weapon. And you can press the point of the sword on your opponent in order to score a touch. For foil, however, there's the additional restriction of the limited target area. This limited target area for foil is only going to be the torso. So waist to shoulders, the front, side, and back of the body are legal target area. So things that are excluded are going to be the head and neck, the entire length of the arms, and then the entire lower body are invalid targets. What this means for you fencing is if you hit the opponent off of the established target area, a light will go off signaling that contact has been made, but no point is awarded, and the action will essentially be reset. However, if you hit the target area and the button compresses, a different light will go off, which signals that you have made contact and you have hit the valid target area and thus scored a point. Additionally, both foil and saber have what is called right-of-way, which is the idea of taking turns attacking your opponent. This stems from, in duels or in live combat, if I strike my opponent, but my opponent also strikes me, no one has come out of that fight well. Because of that, foil and saber both want to encourage the idea of one person gets the touch, no matter what. One person scores. Because of that, they have what is called right-of-way, which is essentially one fencer at a time has the initiative to attack their opponent. When this occurs, they are the only one who can score touches. The way you gain right-of-way is by initiating an attack. So, if I go to attack my opponent and I have started my action before they start their action, I now have the right-of-way, which means I am attempting to score a point on my opponent. The way my opponent gets right-of-way from me is by stopping my attack action. This can occur in one of two major ways. Either my attack falls short. I extend all the way, my legs and arms stop moving, and my opponent has gotten out of distance and I have failed to hit them. They then have the right-of-way to start their own action. However, in that situation, if I attack and I fall short, and they're out of distance, I can then try and start a new attacking action before they start theirs to try and reclaim right-of-way. Because of that, the clearer way to take right-of-way from your opponent is if your opponent is attacking you, you can forcibly stop their action with a parry or a block. That is why foil has this beautiful technical style, because with the small target area and the existence of right-of-way, the best way to take right-of-way from your opponent is by taking a large block, pushing the opponent's blade off target, and signaling to your opponent and to the referee, I have stopped my opponent's attack, now I'm going to attack my opponent, which leads to this beautiful, very fluid, very block-heavy style of foil. Saber, on the other hand, takes right-of-way very differently. The right-of-way rules are essentially the same for the two. However, saber has its own beauty, but it's a very physical beauty. Saber is the weapon of speed, of aggression, of being quicker than your opponent. while you can still take right-of-way through those big parries, normally in Saber, the issue of right-of-way comes down to who started their attack first, or did an opponent's attack fall short. What this means is Saber touches often look like two people charging at each other and trying to be the one that starts the action quicker than their opponent. This leads to Saber being very fast-paced, very enjoyable, very physically impressive to watch, but sometimes a little hard to understand because it's difficult to tell who actually had the right-of-way if both people slam into each other. This is notable because, as I've said, right-of-way exists to try and force there to be one person who gets the touch. What this means in both foil and Saber is if me and my opponent start the action at the same time and both hit each other, there's no distinguishable right-of-way, and the referee will throw both points out, and no one will score, the action will reset. Saber, because of this very physical style, also has a unique trait of being recorded in even casual bouts normally. What this means is even at local tournaments, a lot of the times, especially towards the finals or the semifinals of a tournament, bouts will be recorded and fencers can call for instant replay. This is a new feature that has only been added and really fleshed out in the last several years, but the purpose of this is to allow fencers to challenge if they believe their right-of-way has not been respected by the referee or by their opponent. You of course have a limited number of challenges, but they have become very useful in trying to narrow down the subjectivity of reffing Saber. The other unique traits of Saber stem from the fact that it is based on mounted cavalry combat. Because of that, Saber also has a limited target area, but their target area is what would be considered vital areas while you're riding a horse. Essentially, it means the legs are excluded from the accepted target area. This is because if I am riding a horse and my legs are injured, I may still suffer a grievous wound, but because the horse itself is doing all of the legwork and the footwork for me, the leg injury likely does not affect my ability to continue fighting. What this looks like is that Saber has a legal target area of the groin up. So the groin, the torso, the arms to the wrist, and the head are all legal target area. You'll notice that the hands are also excluded. This was not the case traditionally. Traditionally, the hands would have been a legal target, but with the advent of the electric scoring system, it became too complicated and too subjective to have the hands as a legal target area, where the electrical systems may make contact with your own weapon and cause grounding or unfair point scoring. So the wrist, all the way into the torso, and then the groin to the head. The legs and the hands are the only areas not considered target area in Saber. You'll also notice, and I mentioned this earlier, Saber is our only slashing weapon. Saber does not have that button on the end that compresses to score the point. Instead, the entire length of a saber blade is legal scoring. So, the moment that saber blade makes contact with the opponent's lame, with that metal scoring layer, the moment that occurs, the light will go off. This does make it impossible in Saber for off-target lights to go off, because if you hit your opponent off-target, no light will go off at all, right? If I hit my opponent in the knee with my saber, the action will not stop because no light will go off to signal that any contact has been made. My opponent can continue attacking me. So, Saber and foil are visibly distinguishable from one another by this lame, by this metal scoring layer that they wear to signal what is appropriate target area. You can tell someone's a foilist when they're wearing just a metal vest over their torso and the arms are not covered. A saberist, on the other hand, will wear that same lame, that same metal layer, but it will continue all the way down their arms on top of the traditional fencing jacket. That leads us into epee, which is visibly distinguishable for having no additional scoring layer. An epeist will wear only the traditional fencing whites, the jacket, the glove, the pants, the mask. They will not have on any additional silver layer, right? As a reminder, an epeist, all in white. A foilist, all in white with a silver vest, and a saberist, all in white with silver covering their entire upper body, including the arms. Epee is very unique for being a very tactical weapon. It is also a thrusting weapon like foil, but because epee is based on rapier combat, the entire body is legal target area. you can hit your opponent in the toe of their foot, and if contact is made and the button compresses, that is a legal point. You have scored on your opponent in epee. Additionally, epee treats touching your opponent at the same time very differently than the other weapon. It obviously does not have right-of-way, but additionally, if me and my opponent both hit each other and both lights go off, epee awards a point to both fencers, stating that at the end of the day, while it is better to obviously hit your opponent and not be hit yourself, both fencers have now been stabbed, and it is important to note that for the scoring. So, where foil and saber will throw out simultaneous touches, epee has what is called double touches, where both opponents hit each other, both fencers will score. This leads to epee being a very slow, methodical system. Don't get me wrong, epee is still fast. You still have to have reflexes to do any sort of Olympic fencing. But epee tends to be more patient, more waiting, because there isn't the emphasis on going first to get the right-of-way. Instead, epeists will tend to wait to the perfect moment. And so epee touches will seem like 10 to even 30 seconds of waiting, feel your opponents out, and then action after action after action after action, where no one goes until they're certain they can go for the touch. And so when fencers go, they commit to the action. Because of this, epee has a reputation for being very tactical, where foil is very based in technique and the beauty of one's skills, and saber is based in the magnificence of one's body and their ability to move quickly. Epee allows room for someone to be thoughtful and to think, and to be a more defensive or even a less physically gifted fencer. What this means is epee is not only very good for anyone just interested in trying out kind of the combative side of fencing, but is also generally more fenced at older ages. I have seen epee fencers well into their 90s who sometimes even still attend tournaments, right? By the time you reach the 80s, 90s, there tends to be some slowing down of the body. But because of the tactical nature of epee, I have seen 90-year-old fencers who still put up great fights at tournaments because they simply outthink, they outplan, and they anticipate the moves of their younger, potentially faster opponents. So, a brief summary of the three weapons. Epee is a stabbing weapon that allows the entire body as target area. Because of such, it has a slower, more tactical feel to it, with sudden bursts of very fierce, very aggressive action. This results in a more plodding, fencers standing at distance from one each other and feeling each other out feel to the sport that can be very good for people who enjoy a more tactical, more combat-based feel to the weapon, and fencers who just want to participate in the social and joyous aspects of the sport without necessarily feeling the need to move at lightning fast speeds. You can be a slow fencer and be a proficient epee if you're smart enough and if you're tactical enough. On the exact opposite end of that spectrum, saber is the weapon of speed. It is a slashing weapon with the entire upper body as legal target area, based on getting right of way before your opponent can and decisively settling the touch as quickly as possible. Foil has a similar concern with taking right of way from your opponent, but because of the smaller target area and because of the stabbing nature of the weapon, foil tends to have nice big flowing actions based on stopping opponents' attacks and then launching your own, rather than purely trying to outspeed your opponent. So, for those of you looking to determine what weapon you would like to fence best, these weapons are essentially boiled down to the three key words. Foil is technique. You train skills to execute them better than your opponent. Saber is the weapon of speed. It lacks the precision of foil, and it lacks the tactical plotting nature of epee. It is a speed blitz based on being faster than your opponent. Epee is the weapon of thinking, of tactics, of waiting until your perfect moment and then executing a skill that your opponent cannot defeat or that you can improvise after. So, technique, speed and physicality, tactics with an emphasis on technique as it is a stabbing weapon, speed speed and pure physicality, and then technique and precision. All three of these weapons have all of those traits, but each of these weapons can be dominantly categorized by those traits listed to it. So, welcome again to the Kansas Fencer, and I hope this has helped you narrow down what weapon it is that you may find the most exciting. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.